Hello, nice to see you, nice to hear you. Freely come closer, at least close to the screens. This will be heavy on the terminal, so you may want to look at the screens or at the larger screen over here. I have a couple of images which act as slides, like 4 of them in total, so that's pretty much it when it comes to slides. So without further ado, who uses Maven? You're in a good room, people. Well done, you. So Maven is actually, that's an interesting tool, in my opinion. It helps you with dependencies, it helps you to build your project, it helps you to manage licenses for your projects, it helps you with many, many things, and it offers some convention pretty much out of the box. However, there are certain, well, gotchas, caveats, etc., as in any tool. Well, IMO so far, and we can talk about this later, when it comes to Maven versus NPM, I say torch NPM. When it comes to Maven versus Gradle, I'm usually choosing Maven as opposed to Gradle. And I'm really curious to what your experience are, and let's talk after the presentation. Without further ado, we have 45 minutes, and I have a README. This will be later pushed out as a public repository, so pretty much any examples you will be able to follow this on GitHub. We'll begin with something actually really simple. So we'll begin with the speed searching Maven Central. So you probably are used to going to your browser, then going to Maven Central, finding things, or using the package search integrated with your IDE if you're using the feature set that actually has that. Not every IDE has that. So here is MCS. MCS is a simple tool which allows you to search from the command line using wildcards. So for example, let's say I would like to check some archetypes. And here we have a number of things, and is this large enough? Shall I actually increase the font? Absolutely. Better? All right, so scrolling up. First of all, we have the command. The command has actually 2 switches, very, very simple. And these are help and version, but we have 2 subcommands to search and to search for a class. You almost always want this, to the point that I would actually totally encourage you to use an alias for this. So what does it do? The first command which I actually did is I said, all right, search for archetype. And this actually brought me a number of archetypes. For those of you who are Maven beginners, archetypes allow you to quickly kickstart a project, or to codify a specific project structure along with dependencies and other configuration. So what I'm having here is, the basic. We have found nearly 2,800 archetypes, but we're showing only 20. So what can I do? I can use the switch -L to actually show more or less. And here, fellas, we have, number of things. So let me bring up the script. That's the script. The first command just searches for the archetype. The second does it with the -L, just 5 or just 500. Then you have search for Mockito. Then you have search using the Maven coordinates. So here you're specifying the group, the artifact. So I'm looking for specific things for the dependency. Let me repeat that last command which I'm talking about. Search awk Mockito all. Search, of course. And I can see the dependencies. Yeah, I can see the number of versions. Of course, I'm choosing the one that I want, and that's pretty much it. All right, so MCS, the last part is, of course, the search for a class. So let me just verbatim repeat the command. Now I'm getting many more results because I can see where the class is used. So that's a little bit different approach. This can tell you, for example, if a dependency has what you need. You can, of course, narrow this somehow. Well, when it comes to MCS, that will be something you will be seeing me using in a number of cases as a pretty much, solve the problem. So, any questions? None so far. Moving on. Now, with the central speed search, let's go into largest error. On a JCrete, I think 2 or 3 years ago, I talked with Robert Schulte, and he actually told me something interesting. So we were going out for lunch, and I was like, Robert, You're like the Maven spokesperson, Maven chairperson. Pretty much whenever I hear somebody is talking about Maven project person, it turns out you are the person they talk to. So in your opinion, number one error which people are doing when they are using Maven? And she said, oh, that's easy, Maven clean install. It's like, oh, okay. So hands up, who uses Maven clean install? Of course, now you're probably hesitant to raise your hand, but I can, for example, raise my hand clearly. So why do you think this is a problem? Why Maven clean install is the number one error? Because this is the pretty much historical legacy which we're carrying over from Maven 2. And right now we are almost on Maven 4. So a quick show of hands. Who uses Maven 3.8.1 or higher? Why am I specifying with this very version, do you know? Why 3.8.1? And no, it's not, with the Maven clean install. This is a slightly different thing. Because then Maven Central made a switch, and they actually wanted to use HTTPS over HTTP as a security-minded person. If you're not using 3.8.1, jump over to it. Make sure if I'm not, not pulling your leg, because perhaps it was 3.8.3, not 1. When they introduce HTTPS, I'll check the number, of course, to let you know, but just in case. So back to Maven clean install. Why is this a problem? I have an alias for Maven clean install. So here I'm running it. This is a multi-module project, very simple one. Many things are happening, and we end up on install. So first of all, let's do something interesting. Let's use help to actually tell us the command. Yeah, so describe -d command install. What I'm doing right now is I'm asking Maven for help. I'm telling, hey Maven, give me the info about the build lifecycle. And precisely what is happening is I'm given, that install is a phase. Install is a phase that corresponds to this precise plugin. Now, please notice that validate, initialize, etc., they have not defined. So what does it mean? It means I don't have a plugin specified, which actually jumps out when I say Maven validate. So what happens when I say Maven validate? Well, not much. Here I'm saying Maven validate, and notice, yeah, building, jar, and there is nothing between those two lines, yeah? There is no plugin which jumped out and said, okay, I'm doing the validation. The plugin that usually jumps out for validation, that would be Enforcer. If you don't have Enforcer, your validate will be empty. So back to our life cycle. What we're having here is, as you can see, majority of the phases are totally not defined. And most Maven projects look like that. Most Maven projects use core Maven plugins, and core Maven plugins are actually good enough that you don't need to do clean unless you have some special cases. Like, for example, you did a lot of renames, and therefore old classes are in your target directory. So yeah, that's a good case to use clean. So once in a while do Maven clean install, but usually you don't need the clean. So what you should be using instead of Maven install is Maven package. Why? Because install, what does it do? It takes what package outputs and puts it in your Maven local repository, so the M2 directory. And honestly, I don't know how often are you using your projects as a dependency in another project locally on your machine. But if you do that, that's your case, and Maven install is your tool. That's absolutely the case for Maven install. So Maven clean install, not so much. Of course, if I'm saying, I'm saying core plugins, right? There are a number of core plugins, pretty much Maven anything plugin from org Apache group. That's, the Maven core plugin. If you have not a core plugin, it turns out number of them, since Maven 2, they did a lot of work at improving their own internal infrastructure, at what they are keeping in target, and usually you also don't have to clean every single one of them. So very often Maven clean install can be just superseded by Maven package, and you're much faster with that because the target directory is not constantly being evaporated and rebuilt. So that's one. All right, so let's see. Platform-dependent build, of course. So now, my build doesn't, tell me that it's platform-dependent, and let's take a look at why. All right, you see line 15? Now let me do a quickie. Yeah, it would be. I'm now commenting, every single case of that line in my free POMs. And I'm getting warnings now. Now, please notice that there are plugins which are warning me about that. There are plugins which don't care. Now, what does it mean that a build is platform dependent? And let me tell you something interesting. My laptop uses UTF-8 encoding. So I commented out a line that said, use UTF-8. My platform uses UTF-8, so no change whatsoever. And Maven is complaining why. How do you guys think? Yup, precisely. On Windows, that would be probably, given the location, CP1250 or 1251 or 1252. Those will be, the neighboring encoding. For example, if I remember correctly, Germans will have 1250, we will have 1251, and for example, Ukrainians would have 1252. Don't quote me on that, I'm not a Windows person. But those are the encodings which I've often seen on Windows. So what does it mean? It means that when I'm having anything with diacritical characters, with Polish special letters, with umlauts, and other, for example, accents in French, and I'm having this as a text, then right now my platform gets to decide how we transcode it. So what sequence of 0 and 1s will be used to, for example, encode that. If I'm having this in my sources, and yeah, the good practice is to use ASCII, of course, for your identifiers, but let's just take a look at our projects and see if this is really followed. Or perhaps I'm just unlucky. Nevertheless, fellas, if we want to actually take care of that, the fix is very simple. Just undo the changes in the POM files. Yep. And now, number of plugins less. For one project, there will be no complaints because I already fixed the encoding. So if you leave this out, then you're pretty much asking for trouble. And why is that? On your machine, probably nothing will happen. When you take your sources and move it and launch it from another machine, then you may have pretty much different interpretation of what you have encoded. This touches you when you're using resources files mostly. This touches you when you're not following the good practice of ASCII not being, used for class names, variable names, etc. And yes, there are cases like that. All right, now moving on. Settings. In your M2 directory, you have settings file, and there you can do something like I did here. These are plugin groups. So what happens if I'm using plugin groups and I'm specifying those weird strings here in my XML? So it happens that I can use some plugins without remembering what groups they came from. It happens that I don't need to put those plugins in my POM to be able to use them. So if you are using plugins, this may be actually very helpful. So what is a build plan? It's a plugin. It's not Maven face, it's not Maven build command, so normally, if I don't have the settings, I can't use it like this. But here I can. Build plan tells me something similar to what help was telling me earlier, however, in a nicer output, and also with a fuller set of details. Now, admittedly, on those small projects, this is not really, large thing, but if you happen to have a multi-module project with 74 modules with 12 incoming, like I do, then yes, build plan which tells you what phase is taken by which plugin is really valuable. So what we're having here, plugin, then phase, then ID, then goal. What is the ID? When you're specifying a plugin in the POM, you're using executions. In those executions, you're identifying them by saying ID of the execution, some string which you're using. The goal is the goal of the plugin. Maven uses this interesting notation, And here, I'm shortening this notation with just giving the artifact ID, build plan, and the goal list. So that's why settings and plugin groups in the settings is actually rather interesting. Moment for your questions. None, let's move on. All right, what would be the, actually, search, even better. OWASP, Open Web Application Security Project. Really splendid fellas grouped together under a non-profit foundation which are doing a lot of security work, especially for web applications. Among others, they did this lovely project which is called, oh damn, what's it called? I think it was called Dependency Checker. Oh, here we have it. Yup, wildcards work with MCS, and here you guys have it. Number of tools which you can apply as a standalone tool, as a Maven plugin, as a CI plugin or something else, which can actually tell you whether you have versions of your dependencies with some problems. Now, when we talk about dependencies and problems, let me switch for a moment the project to, what would that be? I think this. I've actually did here some really old archetype, which has number of problems. So let me quickly take you through the POM. Sorry, forgot that I changed my colors. So what we're having here is, we have properties, but actually the original POM didn't have them. And this, yup, that's much better. All right, now, did I eat too much? Probably. Let's read the message. Okay, dependency version is not a valid version. Now, if I have a problem like this, I can of course try to solve this automatically. Unfortunately, that's where Maven doesn't really shine. The tool which I would use to solve automatically versions problem, that would be versions plugin. And here is an example of how to use it. Display, dependency, updates. Unfortunately, the build doesn't finish properly, so I can't use it. And there we go. The pretty much solution to solving this automatically just went off the window. So we need to delve in. And I'm having too many POMs here, I guess. Oh, I know what I'll do. And hopefully this will solve the versions. Yep, the versions are done. The build still doesn't build because of, well, being blocked when resolving dependencies. What you usually do when you have this problem? Well, very often we purge local repository. This means going over to whenever it's stored, finding the necessary subdirectories and doing delete, 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 or pretty much going the atomic option, entire repository. Thank you very much for your service today, and then watching the download messages. So I'm sure that's very fascinating, watching those download messages. I do recommend, for calming your nerves. For example, you had a very stressful meeting with your manager. Yeah, delete the repository. Go and watch how Maven works, and you're just like, yeah, I'm spending my time absolutely productively. Yeah, that's your revenge. Nevertheless, you can, of course, go less dependency, purge, local repository. And that's pretty much does it for you. It takes all your dependencies, then deletes them, and then tries to resolve them. So fetches them again. Really nice when you're believing that there might be a cache issue involved, or when you didn't have the full set of accesses to your local repository or your company repository. And then you talked with your security person and they said, now you have all the clearances. So Maven caches the last time when it tried to resolve a dependency. So what now happens is, of course, every single every single dependency is being fetched again. Lovely, isn't it? We can watch and watch and watch. And what if I told you that we don't have to watch it? What if I told you that we can actually skip all the download messages because we can? So how do we do that? -NTP, no transfer progress. I'm sure this is the highlight of the presentation. Those of you who, now achieved Nirvana can safely leave and enjoy themselves. So what now happens is every single thing is being re-resolved again, but you don't have to read about it. I totally recommend NTP as your switch of choice for every single build in your CI and CD. Why? Because logging takes time. And usually, you're not interested in those kinds of logs. When your CI/CD report comes back and it says there was something fucked up, these are not the messages you will be looking for. So just take them and, have them, out. And when it comes to our project, we now see that we have several artifacts missing. So what I would do usually is I would go with the MCS, I would look for the versions, but of course now, when we have some of the problems fixed, we can try automatically, fix things. Like, for example, use next versions. So what does use next versions do? It just takes a look at your version and tries to apply the next in line. Very simple thing. And it does that for every single thing you have versioned in Maven. Versions with plural. I need to fix my build success. So now let me show you what's the difference. XML versions backup. All right, the properties are one thing, and we'll be talking about properties in a moment, but notice that here we have, different versions. Yeah? Our original POM now supports number of different versions, and this is actually rather nice. And you can see that the versions are being, updated. Now, interestingly, I'm having this over here. One of the POM I restored had something like this, and who can tell me what is this $ curly brace, some fancy string curly brace doing? It's a Maven variable. So in my Maven, I'm able to define variables. And I'm doing this using the properties. With properties, I can actually tell some things. Like, for example, I can tell my compiler that it's supposed to be using Java version, which is defined separately. I can tell, for example, my enforcer that it's supposed to look for Java version, which is defined over here. And then, when I'm doing update from 11 to 14 or 17, I'm doing one change in one place instead of hunting for pretty much everything in my POM hierarchy. So that's really something I totally recommend. And I can also use versioning like here. This gives us some options. Maven versions display property updates. So what now happens is I'm being told how my properties are doing and whether they are actually, in the latest versions or not. I can change the properties to plugin. And this will tell me how my Maven plugins are doing. And Maven plugins are an interesting part. You see, fellas, the Maven plugins are being pretty much dictated by your super POM, parent POM, and then your POM. So you have the entire hierarchy to look at to find out whether you shouldn't be updating. And there are bug fixes in the Maven plugins, so I totally recommend you to have automatic updates. If you want to take one single thing from the presentation, make sure that when you come back to your project, use Maven versions and try to create an automatic process that would propose you, hey, this plugin should go higher, this dependency has a newer version. From security standpoint, that's the best thing this presentation has to offer. And the second would be OWASP dependency checker and Red Hat victims. Okay, so you can display plugin updates, but can you actually set this? So let's see what versions have to do. You see, let's say I was in the NPM land for a moment. Now I'm coming back to Maven and I'm like, damn it. When I was doing this presentation on JDD, I had those comments, really nicely stored, but I don't recall anything. So let's type random string and presenter. Because when I type random string and presenter, I get the list. I get the list of every single goal that the plugin has to offer, and now I can just take a look at the list if I want more. Then, instead of this, I'll just say, help, and I'll get the list along with short explanation. If I want more, -d detail. And with this, I'll even have parameters which I can use for a goal. So fairly quickly, to learn what does it do and how to use it. All right, I guess versions, yeah, let's take a look at the versions because there are some nice things here to show. So, for example, allow me to kill the detail and just go with help. Now, use releases takes all snapshots and remakes them in preparation for updates. Use next releases, then if you know what is the next larger version, it will be applied. The next would be latest versions, and this takes pretty much what is marked as the latest. Now, of course, none of that helps you if I'm a sucky maintainer who actually took a version and silently replaced it. So if I published, for example, version 2.0, and then I was like, damn it, I did something silly there. Perhaps I'll replace the content and hope nobody will realize. And we'll republish version 2.0. Then, if you are the guys who already pulled my version, sucks to be you. What can I say? So versions doesn't protect you against this. I don't think anything does, but there you go. So latest version, that is 1. Latest releases is 1. And then you have update properties, update property. So you have some granularity. You may go one by one, do the updates, do the test, see everything works, and then do something else. Or you can just choose the atomic option. I see a lot of outdated versions, let me update them all, and God will know what he should know. Now, moving on from versions. MVN sort POM verify. So what happens now? Well, not much. I merely sorted my POM, and allow me to show you the difference. Much is changed. So one of the interesting things that sort POM will do is it will replace all the tabulations with spaces. So if you're people who have the tab versus spaces problem, that's your plugin. The other thing is it will try to take your POM apart and split it according to a POM convention, which is actually a rather sensible convention of reading the POM. You usually are after like 3 parts in your POM, and that would be properties, that would be build, that would be dependencies, sometimes the management parts of it, and that would be all. And this allows you to have them in close, pretty much vicinity. Sorting the POM is behind us, security is behind us. Let me see, wrapper. So, fellas, let me remove some things here. All right, so let's say I'm pushing this out as a project, and I don't know if my, let's go with recruitment scenario. I didn't use any recruitment scenario today yet, did I? No? All right, so let's say, you want to change your job, and you want to impress your to-be technical recruiter, perhaps your future partner in coding, I mean. So what do? So you think perhaps they have Maven, but I'll show off that, even if they use Gradle, they can actually use Maven with me. So what I'm doing is I'm calling a wrapper, and I'm saying, hey, get me some files in my repository. Then I can push them along with my code, and, well, actually, sorry, what files? So let's see. That's the wrapper. we're getting a jar file, we're getting properties. The properties are taken from our environment. The wrapper is pretty much taken from the internet. And this allows me to do, use either the shell script or the batch script from Windows to actually use the Java wrapper, fetch the appropriate Maven version, and use it to build. So even if I'm your technical recruiter and I'm having a different version of Maven because reasons, because my project, because whatever, now I'm building your project with the Maven version you used to build it, which of course solves a number of problems. So here we go. And let's see the version, let's see my local version, and fellas, I guess you see what's what, right? Moving on, unless there's question. No questions. Fellas in the back, you may want to come closer to screens, unless you see perfectly and you're good. Okay, I think we have all we wanted here. We can move on to say, yep. All right, so what I want here to show, we're doing here a simple command. We're using build plan, and we're actually we're having a number of different switches passed to Maven command. The switches which are using is -Q for quiet, -E for errors, -X for debug. You can have much greater, let's say, granularity when controlling Maven log output, but these three flags are pretty fast and very good to remember. Now, take a look. The normal build was 14 lines, the debug build was 10 times that, the quiet just outputted the error, and that was all it outputted, nothing happens. If the quiet build goes well, it doesn't output any single line. So that's very helpful. And of course, if we focused on errors, we had 35 lines because we had stack traces. So let's go to the top here. That will be 100-something lines of, and yep, I guess somewhere here. All right, log volume, and we begin with the error. We have, simple build, it fails because there is no goal like Ave on a build plan, so it gives me the list of build plan goals. Notice, fellas, this is the group. To be honest, that's the group which actually caused me to think I will not remember that. I don't want to type it each time I'm using build plan, and that's how I discovered settings trick. So there you go. It of course tells us to use X for debug, and let's do X then, and X gives you plenty of extra information, then it gives you debug information, so a lot of output. Colors happened, I think, in free something. I can't recall exactly which one, but Maven free something already has the colors. And you have, of course, much greater amount of information. And then we have quiet, which just outputs the error, and that's it. And we have the error, which gives you the error, along with the stack trace. So honestly, I'm usually using just Q. And my recommendation to you is use the Q, use the skip test, use the skip validation for enforcer, find out pretty much, with build plan, find out all the modules that you are using in your build plan, then create yourself a profile, call it a quick profile or a dev profile, make it automatically active, and then your builds will just be much, much faster endeavors. Just make sure that on the CI this build never happens, because you will be in trouble. Now let's see something more interesting. So instead of single error, I'll just do Maven clean install site. So I'll use pretty much the full cycle just to have everything. Actually, I should be doing purge local repository to do things. And this is where pretty much the queue shows up, that it's actually very, very helpful, because I told you a number of times already that you need to cut on logging. Why? Because logging takes CPU cycles, logging takes time, logging takes pretty much engages every element on the stack for the input and output. So you don't want that. If you don't need those logs, cut those logs, make them go quiet. And now I'm doing, -L, which is redirect Maven-wise. You can do, of course, the arrow and file, and it works. And take a look. Yeah, 2,000 lines with a debug, 66 with errors, and 0 on quiet. Yeah, so that's actually something. All right, let's talk more. No deal progress was already shown, so I guess we can move on. And where did I put it? Yeah, here. Welcome to Enforcer. Enforcer plugin is, besides making sure that whoever builds your project uses the same version of Maven you want him to use, uses the same version of Java you want them to use. You also can actually use it for build tests. So you can test your build and verify that build important files have not been meddled with. Funnily enough, the build important files in my recent year or so turned out to be git ignores. So what I'm doing here is I'm defining a text file checksum. Interestingly enough, Enforcer has at least 2 different checksum rules, I think even 3. Among many rules of Enforcer, the text file checksum has the glorious benefit of being system agnostic. It means that if my colleague is on Windows, and if my other colleague is on Macintosh and I'm on Linux, it doesn't care, which is splendid in my book. So I'm telling which file, I'm telling what's the checksum, I'm telling how am I checking it with which algo, then I'm saying what to print if it fails, and that's pretty much it. So let's see this. That's the usual clean install, encoding has a problem, then adding a line, and there you go. I'm sorry, Dave, I'm afraid I can't let you do that. And if you have a number of people who, for example, are hard-pressed to offer, quick and dirty solutions, if you have number of people who are whipped into compliance and they are being told that you need to deliver, they will frequently reach for the lowest hanging fruit. And if taking something out of git ignore means that files are there and are automatically generated, they can be pushed into the repository and they magically appear on the remote server, then you can use this trick to don't do it anymore. Nevertheless, that's I think we have one last thing to show. How to show it? I'm being told I can't show you some things on. Yeah, let's do images. So, fellas, let's go in this order. Hopefully now it's clear. Yep. This is a killer build time, honestly. If you have a build like that, people don't want to build anything. I've been in places where the build lasted longer, but let me tell you, 10 minutes, 20, it's already tough. If you have more than that, you're in my situation. So if your Maven builds this long, why does it happen? Well, that's a very good thing to check, and you should actually time your build. And a good thing to do actually is to tell Maven, here is the logging configuration. With this logging configuration, output the times of outputting messages. Then you can actually take a look which module took how many minutes, seconds, etc. So here, let me do something else. What if you have a problem right there when it says in the red failure? What happens with the rest of your build? Well, as you guessed it won't get built. So what you can do is to use Maven daemon. Maven daemon actually approaches this in a slightly different formula. So what happens here is, as you can see, number of builds have happened, and let me move this. Do you see the time? 3 minutes. 3 minutes and 7 seconds, that's the time. Maven Daemon is a project which was born out of frustration. People at Quarkus, they have even, more monstrosity of a build than I do. That happens, I take comfort in that, so let me tell it to you again. There are people who have worse builds than I do. I'm hoping that this is registered and recorded. Now, moving on. So people at Quarkus, they actually, wanted to build their software in a quick and easy manner. So they came up with Maven Daemon, which first of all launches a program and uses this program to store a cache of artifacts. This cache of artifacts is something that it's being reused. So when you have, for example, results of compilation or of test runs, they can be turned into artifacts, they can be, cached and later reused. Now, the cache is, of course, pretty much tied with your Java version. So if you have multiple Maven projects and some use Java 11, other use Java 8, other use Java 17, then you will have to support different daemons. And for that, you need sometimes to have, resources on your machines. Nevertheless, we are reaching the question and answer time. So let me finish this and, the Q&A will begin. So what happens with Maven Daemon is that build happens concurrently. Let me quickly switch and whatever Maven can do, Maven Daemon can do too. So if you have clean install, it can do clean install. If you want package, it can do package. If you want to do anything else, it will do anything else. It will give you the info about how concurrent is your project. The lower percentage, of course, the worse you are. What does it mean that your project is not concurrent? It means that it cannot arrange or rearrange your modules because there are subtle dependencies between them. How to find the dependencies? So if you use Maven help, it will show you things like resume from, like PL or projects, and there is also the also make. Yep, also make and also make dependence. These command switches you can use with just Maven to find out what is the structure of your multi-module Maven project, where the dependencies happen. So if you're building something and you do -AMD, also make dependence, you see what is dependent on this particular module. All right, so Maven Daemon actually starts a daemon and then tries to, do any operation. Now, if I do install, it will repeat all the phases. If I do install one more time, notice that the times got shorter. Yeah, because I'm actually reusing what was already done, and therefore I'm getting, the speed up. I do not know of a faster way to speed up than Maven Daemon, but I've been told that you can actually try profiling your modules, and there are some switches which you can do for that, but unfortunately, didn't yet get there. But ask me next time during the next presentation and I'll probably show you. Question and answers.